While the passives are some of the most important skills for the Sorceress, there are a whole slew of support skills that she can actively cast to aid her should you want to run certain non-traditional builds, so over the next few episodes we're going to hit on these, starting today with the offensive support skills Enchant and Thunderstorm. The reason why these two skills is just because the sheer amount of things people get wrong about them, even to this day. Starting with the more popular one and the cornerstone of several niche builds, such as the Melee Sorceress, Bow Enchantress, and even sometimes used for various low-level boosts or team play, we have Enchant, as you could probably have guessed by that second one. Probably. This skill is a lot punchier than you would likely realize at first due to how it interacts with several tools available to the Sorceress, though it is also useful for supporting allies even though it doesn't give quite as big of a boost to them. Starting with the friendly support though, since it's, well, simpler, you basically give your allies a set amount of fire damage to their attacks, a % attack rating boost that gets up to at least a reasonable level, and a really cool red glow on their weapons, at least on players. Though the effects will still apply to summons and mercenaries, you don't get to have the fun graphical change to tell you if it's still active on them or not. But on the Sorceress herself, she's able to take it up a notch since, unlike on allies, she's able to double dip on the fire when doing melee attacks. This means basically the base amount of fire damage added to the attack is ramped up on the skill itself by things like Fire Mastery and Rainbow Facets and the like, and then when melee attacks land, it's ramped up yet again, basically double dipping on the sheer amount of fire damage you can deal because it multiplies it by that % yet again. Though for the Bow Enchantress, this is sadly not going to happen since range attacks are excluded from this double dipping effect due to how strong it was before being patched out, but you may be wondering why that is, and that's because fire damage, yes, even damage from skills like Enchant and Holy Fire, is added to the explosive fire damage of skills like Exploding Arrow and Immolation Arrow, the former of which can be found on several unique bows. Among them, the ever-popular Kuko-Shikaku bow, which in the early days of Lord of Destruction was able to clear cows at speed on par with Javazons due to this, and a couple of other interesting interactions. Now, even though that's been patched out, there are still a couple oddities worth noting with it, such as there being no penalty for range, so that 1/3 penalty it lists is basically a complete lie, and it doesn't work that way. There's also how the character screen almost never shows the correct damage, but that's just normal for the lying character screen. But for the most part, the rest of the stuff behaves like you'd expect, with higher level beating higher level, so you can't just override a stronger enchant to troll people, and while the actual damage from enchant does start to fall off a bit in Hell, when combined with other boosts and the attack rating perk, it can still be made to work just fine. Now, on the other side of the pile, we have Thunderstorm, another skill with a ton of odd myths about it, but that thankfully a lot of them are bullcrap, and the skill is a lot more simple than Enchant's nuanced does and does not boost this and that type setup. And this is mostly because while Thunderstorm doesn't lie in its description, it doesn't tell you everything either. It has a similar highest level wins type deal, but is a bit more finicky about actually needing skill levels for it to stick around, meaning hot swapping just for it, not quite as highly recommended. That said, if you are going to use it, you generally will want high levels of it to begin with, so that means you need to put points in it. This is because unlike skills where they want faster casts, the only thing that impacts the timing between lightning bursts is the level of the skill itself, starting at a bit over 4 seconds between bolts at level 1 and dropping down to a little over a second at more invested levels, ultimately capping out at 1 bolt per second at a whopping level 60, though in more reasonable mid-30 levels it'll still be close enough to a second for it not to matter too much. Now, the major reason most people don't invest a lot in it outside of novelty's sake is that despite being a semi-passive skill, you're not going to see it really making a drastic change in the battlefield due to its damage really not being updated significantly outside of an added synergy in 2.4 that really still doesn't bring it up to par, since a few thousand damage per second without any aim control doesn't really do much. There's been a few suggestions on how to improve it, but we'll see if any of them come down the pipeline in 2.5 or later. Personally, I'm a fan of either giving it an area of effect on strike or possibly making it a lightning enchant effect of sorts, but until they decide to focus on it, only time will tell the direction they take. Overall, these two skills on the surface don't really fit a direct need currently, but they do provide benefits and are unique in their flavor compared to a lot of other skills, not just on the Sorceress, and that's ignoring their niche uses like the auto-aim of Thunderstorm for some specific PvP builds, or the specialty uses and support role of an Enchantress. So do you enjoy them as is, or would you like to see some changes dropped on them? Mention it down below, and as always, thanks to all the patrons and channel members for keeping this channel afloat.